Hi, everyone, and welcome today to our live webinar on understanding the global games markets, how to streamline your game strategy with actionable market data, forecasts, and trends. We're going to get started any second now, so thank you all for joining. Thank you all for making time today to join us here. Before I dive into the content, first, a bit of introduction about myself. My name is Wijman. I've been at Newzoo for over 6 years now. Started my career as a strategy analyst working for Accenture, but made the jump to gaming at Newzoo in 2017. And for those past 6 years, I've led our market analyst team and also led the creation and production of our global games market reports, including the market sizing and forecasts that go into that. So I suppose everyone that signed up for this webinar is familiar with what Newzoo does. But just as a short introduction, we're a market intelligence firm fully dedicated to the games markets. And we provide various data products, one focused around knowing the games, which is our games performance monitor, knowing the gamers, which are both based on consumer research, and we've separated that in our global gamer study, and our game health tracker, which tracks brand health and purchase funnel data on a month-to-month basis. However, for today, we're going to be pulling insights from the games market reports and forecast product, which is where we share our games market sizing forecasts and talk about the trends that are shaping the market on a global and a local level. Proud to announce that we've just launched our newest edition, full version, a month ago in July 2023. The flagship report within this product is called the Global Games Market Reports. What I'll be showing today and sharing today is mostly insights that is from the free version of this market report that you can download from our website now. However, there is also the option to upgrade into a paid version. Maybe some of you already have access to that. And in addition to what you'll see today, just wanted to share that product has in-depth forecast for players, revenues for over 100 games markets, player forecast for 7 game ecosystems, much more detail when it comes to the 36 markets where we also do consumer detail. And we also describe the market qualitatively with 2 special focus topics, 7 key global trends. And we include a view on the biggest gaming companies that are publicly listed. So all of that's available in this product. And today, I'll be sharing some of the insights from that product. So hopefully you learn more about the games market. Just to talk about the agenda for today. Today is a 25-minute webinar, roughly, or I'll spend 25 minutes talking rather. And at the end, I have my colleague Michael on standby, who will be running a Q&A for 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. And he will then pick them up and we'll cover them at the end. Once the webinar is completed, we will share the deck and the video with all attendants. Now, the webinar will be split in 3 parts. I'm going to start wowing you with some of the numbers of the global games market. The second section, I will be cherry picking some of the most interesting trends from our recent reports, talk about 4 of those, and then we'll go back to a bit more data and mostly talk about genres and monetization last year, this year, and how that is evolving. And then at the end, we bring it together, of course. So let's start with what we are perhaps best known for, the big numbers. At Newzoo, or rather in the games market reports and forecasts, we look at 3 different drivers for growth in the global games market. We look at the number of people that are playing games or players, then the number of people that are paying for games content, which we define as payers, and then we look at the revenues generated by those people, which are the revenues. And as revenues and payers is driven by players, we're going to start by looking at the global player forecast. And as you can see here, that's on track for very healthy growth. We forecast that global gamer numbers will grow quite rapidly actually this year, from just shy of 3.2 billion by the end of last year to almost 3.4 billion by the end of this year. And in fact, we also forecast that to continue to grow to 2026 to almost 3.8 billion. Now, and then as you can see on the right as well, by far the most popular platform when it comes to playing, and we'll see later, but a bit of a spoiler that also accounts for revenues, is mobile players. But that doesn't mean that the PC or console segment are not in a healthy place. In fact, player numbers are growing for all three segments, and I think that's important to mention. And we forecast them to grow for all three segments as well. Both PC players, console players, and mobile players will continue to grow and have grown for the past years. Now, what is driving this growth? For the most part, best way to explain is, first of all, people don't really age out of games anymore, and that's true for mostly for Western markets, but also like the more mature Eastern markets, and then I'm talking about China, Japan, South Korea. So what's happening as younger generations age into gaming, more people get into the bottom of the funnel, if you will, but people don't really age out that fast anymore. Some people might do, of course, but the majority doesn't. And if, in fact, even the engagement boost we got from the pandemic, like 2020, 2021, a lot of those players are sticking. They might have played less, but they are continuing to play. So that's driving that number up. And then what's driving that number up is mostly people from what we would call emerging regions or emerging markets. And I'm talking Middle East and Africa, Latin America, some regions in Asia as well, where it's really better internet infrastructure, easier access to payment methods, growing middle class, cheaper gaming devices, cheaper mobile phones particularly, that is really driving the player number to grow. So there is some growth in mature markets, just to recap, but that is mostly younger people aging into gaming and not many people aging out of gaming. But the real strong growth is driven by people from emerging regions. Shifting the view a little bit to what that means for revenues. Top line number, we forecast the games market to generate 187.7 billion in 2023. That represents 2.6% growth year on year, which is great news because for those that might have seen it, we did estimate that last year the games market declined a little bit, which was mostly the effect that it grew a lot during 2020-21 and then got a bit of a slowdown during 2022, which was a lot of that to do with the fact that the pandemic was over. By segment, we forecast that console games will actually drive a lot of this growth. And that also requires some context from 2022. So while the console segment is in a very healthy place, some of this growth is also more a correction of growth that didn't happen last year. So a lot of hit games that were due to release in 2022, maybe even 21 or 2020 in some extreme cases, got delayed. And now all of those games are hitting the market this year. So it's a very strong lineup for console this year. Add to that the fact that most of these supply chain issues that were keeping the install base for new PlayStation and Xbox devices down, and you have a sort of perfect scenario where console games is going to drive much of the growth this year. PC games is more or less flat. As you can see here, browser PC games is kind of keeping the market down with that almost 17% year-on-year decline. But downloaded box PC games or client PC games are more or less on track for growth. Mobile games at 0.8% year-on-year growth is almost flat, and a large part is to do with the ongoing challenges regarding user acquisition that are the direct result of privacy-related changes. So without diving too deep into that, mobile games previous years mostly monetized by a very effective targeting of users. And because of changes to how you can track these users by Apple and by Google, that method is not so effective anymore, and that put the market in a bit of a struggle to continue growing at the same page. But it's remarkable that the segment is growing in any way. One more thing to call your attention to, what I put on the right of this slide is just a call out about VR games and cloud gaming. Both of these are emerging markets. Both of these growth rates will be faster or higher than the global games market growth rate. However, when you compare them to the overall revenues in the market, we're talking about 1-2% of the market from VR games and for cloud games. So all those years are promising markets. For now, they remain very niche. Same data, a bit of a different view. How does the global game market evolve per region? Here you see that 46% of the market is generated by players in Asia Pacific. And I can tell you that in previous years, that used to be even higher, close to 50% even. But because this is a year that's driven by console game revenues, and console gaming is more popular in Europe and North America and in Japan, but not so much in the other two mega markets in Asia Pacific, China and South Korea, where mobile gaming is a large segment, as it is in Japan, by the way, which means Asia Pacific grows a bit less than the global market, which means it is losing some market share. The fastest growing regions, however, here are Middle East and Africa and Latin America, which both outgrow the global average by quite a bit. And again, the call out here, just so you know how concentrated some of the revenues in the market are, 49% of all consumer spending comes from just two markets, China and the US. Already alluded to some of the statistics here, but we are forecasting that the games market is on track for quite strong growth towards 2026. The biggest growth driver in the coming 3 years will also be console. That is in part due to that growing install base that I talked about before. That is also because first predicted, now more or less announced, there is going to be quite likely a new Nintendo device coming in next year. And usually Nintendo's strategy is to launch that device with 1 or 2 heavy hitters from its main franchises, which traditionally really sell well and give quite a boost to that segment of the market. So console is what drives this growth from 187.7 billion to over 200 billion in 2026. But again, also here, just like players, we're forecasting that all 3 segments will contribute to growth towards that year. Now, that sums up some of the global market key takeaways. Just to recap a little bit with you guys before we move on to the trends. Global players will continue to grow, reaching 3.4 billion this year, and that growth is driven by emerging regions, as player growth has nearly capped out in mature markets. The market will generate 187.7 billion in 2023, which is growth compared to last year. Mobile accounts for the highest share of revenues, but console will be the 23's biggest revenue growth vehicle, and will continue to do so as we grow towards 2026, when the current console generation will be in full swing by then. And in full swing, what we mean there is that it's kind of reached this perfect equilibrium between high install base and a lot of content. And usually that is, or historically, that is around year 6, year 5, year 6 of the console generation, which, given that they launched in 2020, but the install base grew, the growth of that install base was hampered by the supply chain crisis a little bit. We expect that to be right around that year 2026. And we also expect that mobile developers have adapted to the new privacy landscape better by then, which is also going to fuel growth in that segment of the market. Okay. Once more, a reminder that if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. For now, I am going to carry on, moving to some of the key trends that we're seeing in 2023 that drive and shape this market that we're talking about. And the first thing that I want to talk about, and this is going to be a 3 keys actually, is the live services boom growth. particularly on console and PC. Not talking about mobile for now, where many of games or most popular games have always been live services, but mostly interested in talking about the live services coming to console and PC. So what are we seeing that's driving this? Pretty much all parties that we identified here are sort of eyeing these live services as a way to boost recurring revenues and to ensure more stable growth. I want to call you back to some of these player chart growth charts and also the revenue charts that I've shown. There is still growth, but it is not so much as it has been in the past years. Like, we're not talking double-digit growth as we see in 2020, maybe around 2017. Players aren't growing by 10% every year anymore. So if you want to keep posting those same growth numbers as a company, as a publisher, you're going to have to essentially be monetizing your current players better. This is a very simplification, but that's what we believe essentially is the thought behind this. Add that to the fact that on mobile, user acquisition, so new users coming in, has become much harder, which also pushes you to think about, okay, if it's much harder to get new users, where I'm going to get growth from my current players. So that kind of creates the situation where all of these four parties, so publishers, manufacturers, tech giants, and mobile developers, are eyeing these live services. And just to put some stats behind that, we looked at the top 10 games ranked by monthly active users across console and PC. We found 9 out of 10 are live service games, arguably 10 out of 10, kind of depends on your definition. And also that bar one of them, and even that's debatable because Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was the only one that released in 2022. But you could argue, and in fact, it's unfortunately a bit hard for us to prove this, that much of that engagement is driven by Warzone 2. So live service games are very popular, do very well, get a lot of players. And as you mentioned, the player base is growing slower than many companies' growth aspirations, which means that many even previously studios known for single players are turning to live services. And the example here that we talk about, Assassin's Creed by Ubisoft, coming Assassin's Creed Infinity. Last of Us Factions will be a multiplayer game based on the Last of Us franchise. Horizon's been announced to get an MMO and a multiplayer game as well, I believe. The issue that we identify here as well, and that's a thought that I want to put in everyone's head attending, is that all of these games, live service games, and there's a reason why we rank them by MAU, they run engagement first models, which means that the idea is you drive engagement or more people to play more hours of your game. And because you constantly give them the opportunity to spend, your revenues will rise. And that's been very successful for some of these successful ones we've seen in the market. But if everyone eyes this and everyone pushes towards live services, there's only so much playtime you can split up between all of us, which means the market does risk oversaturation. And I would not be surprised to see that many of these live service experiments will not succeed, as they haven't in the past years either, because we're always talking about some of the games that do make this not a top ranking, but there are just as many that don't. I could spend the next 30 minutes talking about this, but we are moving on to the next section. And this is a topic that's been in the news a lot, dominating headlines. Generative AI, how does it affect the future of game development? And what we did in the report, and you can read this in the free report, is that we kind of looked at the pros and cons of current use cases, but also looked at some of the risks. So I want to quickly talk you through that. We believe the biggest immediate impact generative AI may have is that it can streamline game development. So we're much looking at the game development side right now, not so much about how AI can be integrated into games directly into a consumer-facing product. But with all that we talked about, game developments and budgets and project lengths are skyrocketing, finding talent is hard, AI can help here. AI can also help in prototyping, concept art, very quickly bringing an idea into a format that people can critique on and that you can move forward from. And it can also help some smaller teams, for example, Sponge Games, who developed High on Life, leverage Gen AI to create mostly AI voices and art that was used in the background. So there's definitely some use case for it that we're already seeing in action. Like there's, by this time, probably hundreds, if not 1,000 examples just like this. But we're also seeing some of the risks. And the first one that we want to call out here is the legal case for using AI-generated content in games, particularly if the person using this or the studio using this does not know what databases the AI is learning from, and therefore what content is being used to create their content. You open yourself up to copyright lawsuits without, well, good due diligence. There's also some pushback from developers, but mostly so from the community, which means you may want to reframe AI as an opportunity to educate players rather than pushing AI as something that is creating value and amazing in itself. You may even want to de-emphasize it or not mention it at all. And then, of course, a very important point that we do have discussed as well is the fact that advances in generative AI might negate the need for some jobs in the industry, which sadly could lead to layoffs. So, one more trend that we want to talk about is the rise of complementary gaming devices. We call them complementary because unlike the Switch, so this is a trend, we're talking, it's handheld for now. It doesn't have to be handheld. But we're seeing that what the Switch has done, and the Switch brought, of course, in 2017, a very innovative hybrid approach. Bring your game with you, but also use it to hook up to your monitor or your TV to play. So it's both a typical home console as well as a handheld. And that's sort of, not immediately, but in the past year, 2 years, kicked off this new wave of devices that are very much complementary. So the Steam Deck that was launched in 2022, this year, Asus ROG Ally, and some others as well, by the way, that I haven't put in this slide here, the Logitech G Cloud, for example, and also the announced Project Q from PlayStation. These three are very much examples of what we call complementary devices because, at least for what we're seeing right now, these devices are being bought by people that already own a PC or that already own a console because they're highly tuned into making effective use of that game library these players have already built up, and therefore allowing them to benefit from that. Don't think that this is going to change the trajectory of PC gaming altogether, but this is some of the innovation and trends that sustain the PC gaming market, particularly for those middle two, the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally. Last part that I want to call out here, because I'm also conscious of the time, some of the news or some of the releases we've seen around transmedia, particularly want to call out The Last of Us, Super Mario Bros. Thankfully, we're far past the time where games and movie and games and media was not a good combination. In fact, they can be great combinations, but what we wanted to do here was not look at, oh, how many people are viewing the HBO series or Netflix series, or how many people went to this movie, but what does it do for a game? And that was very interesting. We found that across a set of multiple titles and franchises that we looked at, we saw an average plus 8% MAU rise in a game franchises that just launched a movie or a series. And many of these were new MAU as well. So it's not just a good marketing opportunity, it's actually creating engagement for games, and it's leading to sales because we saw new players come in as well. Please read this in the report as well. For now, we'll move on because I do want to cover the last section as well, which is called genres and monetization. What we did here, what we're looking here is the share of revenue by category. The categories were defined as full game downloads, downloadable content, microtransactions, and subscriptions. And we split them between PC and console, just to get a look at how monetization is evolving. What we saw, a relatively even split between premium and in-game revenue for PC and console. But most interestingly, I think we see that towards the next coming years, we at least forecast that, and we also see this looking at previous years, that in-game revenue or recurring revenue is outpacing premium revenues by quite a bit. So this roughly 50-50 split or even 60-40 split that we see in console last year is rapidly changing. And part of that is being driven by that live service trend we talked about earlier. Final bit before we move into some Q&A, look at some of the top gaming genres in 2023, starting at PC. The most popular genre, actually, first to talk about PC, what's interesting to call out maybe here as well is that we're talking about the most popular genres now, but actually of the three segments, games being played on PC is the most diverse. So while shooter is the top genre, it only accounts for 14.1% of PC revenues. And as we go to console and mobile, you see that that's slightly different. What is also interesting is that shooters we expect to grow almost 5% year on year this year. And recall back that we only expected the PC market to grow by 1.6% year on year. So even though it's already most popular genre, it is growing much more rapidly than markets. And it does say something about all three segments more and more defining how people play on them more and more as people get more access to other devices, as it becomes easier to get into console gaming, to get into mobile gaming. We do see that some of these genre preferences are being reinforced. And that's also why shooter is already most popular genre, but also on set to grow much faster than the market. For example, looking at console game genre, which lends itself, big screens lends itself very well for adventure type games. So Zelda, game of God of War, those type of games. And it already contributes 17% of console revenues in 2023. But another one unique to call out here is sports, of course, which really has a massive presence on console as the third genre by revenue, but wouldn't rank near the top 5 on PC or mobile. And similarly here, even though adventure games are the biggest games, they're still expected to grow 6.9%, which is more or less on pace with market. And a lot of that is to do with the titles coming out, of course. And then finally, looking at mobile, this one's even more massive. Role-playing presents 23% of the total revenues for the segment. It's a top genre by revenues by far, and that is mostly to do with how popular it is in 3 of the top mobile markets, China, Japan, and South Korea. Were we to look at Western markets, puzzle would probably take the #1 spot. However, here we do see that role-playing game revenue will decline year on year, as will strategy, which is the #4 genre here. And that is because the UA changes, so the user acquisition changes that are due to Apple's privacy changes, disproportionately affect these two genres that more than the other genres rely on monetizing a smaller group of users. So with these genres, you typically see that the people that pay tend to pay a lot on average, whereas puzzle, adventure, idle, that's much more spread out across the player base. That's all the content for today. Thank you again for listening. I hope we have a minute or two left to answer some questions. Just to wrap it up, the key takeaways for each section. Games market in numbers, 3.4 billion players this year, 187.7 billion in revenues, and on a trajectory to grow even more. In the key trends, we talked about market saturation for live service games, particularly on PC and console. We talked about the impact of generative AI in game development, complementary devices for PC gaming mostly, and then the impact of transmedia in games. And on the topic of genres and monetization, we quickly spoke about premium in-game revenues and how they were close to equal in 2022, but how in-game will grow much faster in the coming years. and how the most popular genres on PC and console, so shooter and adventure respectively, will continue to grow and at pace or even faster than market, but role-playing will struggle to do that on mobile. Thank you all for attending. It was a pleasure to present this to you. Please download the free report if you haven't yet. If you're interested in learn more, reach out to me. You can reach out to me via email. You can reach out to me via LinkedIn, or just reach out to Newzoo directly, and we'll be glad to help you. Now, I am going to pull Michael, who's been on standby, into the call. And then there he is. And Michael, you might be able to share some questions.
Yeah, we'll get some questions in real quick. I know we're over time, but real quick, does global player forecast account for multi-platform players?
Yes. So our global player forecast, particularly if you were to subscribe to our product, we break that down per segment, and we even break that down per region. We break that down per country. So you will know how console, PC, and mobile will grow. And in that, yes, we of course take into account that more and more people play on multiple, if not all, devices.
Great. And then, do you have numbers on head-mounted displays like Quest?
I'm starting to get into starting to sound like a tape recorder here, but yes, we do. However, those are also in the paid version of this report. So if you're interested in that, then please reach out to me or to Newzoo directly.
And then finally, we'll get to the rest of the questions at another point in time. Finally, do you feel the increase in shooters is the outcome of major publishers trying to hold on to recurrent revenue? For example, PlayStation doubling down on live services while shutting down studios that aren't making games as a service titles.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, very good point as well. Like, of course, and I think with many of these things that we talked about today, actually, there is, of course, a part where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because recurring revenues will grow because people expect them to grow and therefore prioritize their resources. And leading studios such as PlayStation prioritize their resources because they expect them to grow. And then they, in turn, feed that content to the players. And most likely, especially given the average quality output by PlayStation Studios, people will engage with that and play that. So naturally, then recurring revenue will grow in favor of, maybe a premium project or a project for a premium game that might have got cut because it wasn't within the strategic priority of, in this case, PlayStation, but that could be in any other studio. But maybe to keep talking on that a little bit, it is also one thing that I haven't really touched upon at all today. But it is also sort of reassuring to see things like multi-game subscriptions grow. So Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, where there is more of there's more room for smaller or premium projects, or that might even reinvigorate a premium game that already launched a couple of years ago, because it doesn't have to be one or the other. Can take from all ends a little bit. So I definitely don't want to sound like the only way to go is a live service game, because there is room for all this type of monetization within the market. However, when we look at what grows faster compared to some of the other categories, then it is recurring revenue.
All right. I think that will do for this session. Unfortunately, we are not able to reach out and answer every question. But if you still have a burning question, we do have, you can ask us at questions@newzoo.com. I also linked it in the chat session. and we'll be more than happy to reach out and reply to your answers.
Yeah, and I believe to add on to that, Michael, we will read all the questions that have been posted in the chat today, and if we haven't had the time to respond to your question in the live session today, then we will reach out to you individually, most likely somewhere mid next week, to help answer your question. With that, thanks everyone for attending once again. Thanks for giving us your time. Thanks, Michael, for moderating the Q&A. Please reach out to us, as we've said, and I hope to see you at one of these webinars again soon. For now, have a great rest of your day.